Good evening and welcome to the State of the Liberation Movement with Secretary Martin Mungwa, PhD, F.ASCE Fellow of the American Society of Civil Engineers. And as always, we commence with Undaunted, bringing into the news untold stories. I am Star Smart. Let's begin. These are facts, not humor. World's fastest man's 100-meter, 1. Usain Bolt, 9.58 arrived. 2. Tyson Gay, 9.69 arrived. And 3. Johan Blake, 9.69 arrived. Amazonian struggle race record, we have 1. Colson Ayangwe, 40 years, delayed and failed. 2. Cho Ayaba, 32 years, delayed and failed. 3. Akwanga E, 32 years, delayed, failed. 4. Dr. Sacco, 5 years, cruising to Boya. Marianta, 6 months, crashed and failed. Chris Arnold, 2 months, crumbled, crashed and failed. 7. Ayuk Tabe, 3 months, surrendered and failed. 8. La République du Cameroon, 52 years attempt to assimilate, failed. Dr. Sacco is cruising to Boya. All enablers would have to move out of the road or be moved. The number of years is not what matters, but smart people take a few years like the athletes above. This is from Iba Nelson. Thank you. Well, yesterday we found out there are some people in the diaspora who are encouraging fighters to go after other fighters who are not under them. The question is, why leave the oppressor to fight another defender of the people if you are truly for the people? Another question would be, why not put all of that energy in defeating the enemy instead of you reducing your strength? Well, except you were the enemy yourself. Else, it is only wise to know in the meantime, the enemy of my enemy is my friend, as the popular saying goes. It's going to be another interesting session with the mouthpiece of the interim government, Dr. Martin Mungwa, F.ASCE, in tonight's Liberation Movement as we look at La République du Cameroon's last hope, defeated but unrelenting, La République du Cameroon's one-item agenda from the failed cubic monologue sealed under a secret oath. I know you can't wait, so we'll move on with the prime headlines. Latest in the Russian-Ukraine war. Ukraine put forward unrealistic conditions for peace. These are the prime headlines today: the war in Amazonia, the irony of Professor Colson Ayangwe utterances, the change in the ground game, the new ground game in motion, code activated, and in sports we'll look at Cristiano Ronaldo as he says others don't care about Manchester United. The media greatly influences society. They inform people about what is happening. It permeates people's lives by creating their own criteria and opinions. In this way, the media moves the masses, creating different social movements.
For over 60 years, the people of Ambazonia were deprived of such privileges. The privilege to enhance their own criteria and opinion. They have suffered cultural genocide for 6 long decades, but not in this age and not with undaunted ABC Amber News on board.
You must understand that wars are won in the media. The speed of the revolution and Ambazonia's quest for freedom cannot be explained in the diligent use of the media.
Franco-Cameroon colonizers, among other strategic moves, weaponized the media against Ambazonia for so long, and they continue to do so even today. The question would be, how much do the oppressed people of Ambazonia need to counter the media rage?
Indeed, how much more is required to stop the genocide? The carnage in Ambazonia didn't start today. In 1961, 1970, 1984, 1992, Ambazonians were slaughtered in huge numbers and help was not forthcoming. Why? Because the oppressor was the piper in the media.
The good news is we have what it takes to dictate the pace.
Right, ABC Amber TV is taking advantage of the wonders of multimedia aggressively
to inform the misinformed and disinformed with undaunted and other revolutionary programs bringing it to the news untold stories.
Most importantly, to win the media war by taking ABC Amber TV into every multimedia platform.
In a word, where the importance of storytelling can never be overemphasized, Ambazonians has to tell her own story, not the other way round.
And like we say it always, Ambazonia must narrate her story accurately. We can do this together, you know, right? You are just a click away. Visit our website at www.abcambertv.com, and the steps are quite simple.
With just a click on the website, you can become a club member with so many benefits.
You can also make a one-time donation, advertise and showcase your goods and services at the marketplace on the website.
That was easy, right? You're welcome on board.
And thank you for opting for the winning team. Yesterday's debate on ABC Amber TV was one of its kind. Revelations were made, facts were high-signed, clarifications. Feedback has it that the program was quite educational, and Barrister Fru John Nso expressed will understand why a very intelligent man like Professor Carlson Ayangwe will exhibit so much jealousy in his words and actions towards the president, Dr. Samuel Ikome Sako, a man who has sacrificed his life for the freedom of his people. This is where we'll begin the full briefings of tonight's Undaunted. I am Star Smart, and good evening once again, fellow Ambazonians. It is said that to whom much is given, much is expected. This alone explains why out of dismay, Barrister Nso expects that Professor Ayangwe, a good scholar, a great lawyer, should do better. He said in spite of his rich academic profile, Ayangwe has never been a good leader, and that he doesn't understand what the revolution is all about. Barrister Fru lamented said, so Ayangwe has thrown his back on Amazonia as he has never contributed to the draft. He has never also shown up to support the interim government. That coming up now to talk about raising funds for the war should be ignored because he has been away for 6 years and has turned his back on his people. Barrister Tim Mbesea, who initiated the discussion in a comely tone, was also very severe on Professor Carlson Ayangwe. He believes that Carlson Ayangwe's words and actions are proof of betrayal, of course. And in fact, during this 2 hours exclusive discussion with Top Party King, it was clear that Carlson Ayangwe is a clear example of intellectual dishonesty. There is an excerpt of this video that I like the technicians to play.
Now, that his outing was intended against the interim government. Because if you listen to it very carefully, very, very carefully, you'll know that this is who is jealous. He lost the election. It was not what you call it, the selection of the person that will act as an acting president when Seseko was arrested in Nigeria. He lost that election. That selection, he was a candidate. Dr. Sako was a candidate. Chris Anu was a candidate. Bob Harmony was a candidate, and Dr. Sako won that election. And now, everybody who was in that, except Chris Anu, every person who was in that selection has been in this revolution till today. Dr. Onyangwe, Professor Onyangwe packed his bag and baggages and left until he resurfaced after his retirement somewhere in England and made statements. He has been making derogatory statements against the interim government since then.
The audio of Carlson Ayangwe. All right, now that's the video right there. The audio of Carlson Ayangwe that has been widely criticized resurfaced the discussion of the Naira 10. Question is, what happened to the Naira 10? Many unanswered questions. Let's have a flashback. According to reports, Naira 10, these are highly educated men, gentlemen with careers in significant niche areas. Most of them are university professors, distinguished academic credentials in disciplines such as veterinary surgery, structural engineering, architecture, and ICT. They have a track record of significant contributions in knowledge generation and in community engagement. These political prisoners also include 2 barristers at law and human rights activists, 1 teacher, and 1 political scientist. These prisoners of conscience are all but for one below 60 years of age. They are all married and have children. Their wives and children are under severe physical and emotional trauma and pain on account of the incarceration of their husbands and fathers for no just cause. Now, finally, these gentlemen are all legally residents in Nigeria. Some are university professors for years and some have refugee status. Others are registered asylum seekers. Now, the kidnap and hostage holding of the Naira 10 contravene provisions of the Nigerian and Cameroon constitutions. Both constitutions provide for freedom of association, assembly, and speech. The law in both countries set out procedures for arrest and detention. Most remarkably, there is no extradition treaty between the both countries. Whatever happened was in defiance of international laws and on their own national laws. This can only happen in Africa. Very scandalous. The law in both countries does not authorize arbitrary arrest and detention. It does not authorize kidnapping and hostage taking. It does not also authorize torture. The kidnapping, smuggling, and incommunicado detention of the Naira 10 is not sanctioned by any judicial process. The law has been trampled upon. The Naira 10 were simply kidnapped, held incommunicado for weeks, forcibly repatriated to Yaoundé at night under armed terror, while in Yaoundé they are further held incommunicado and without access to sunlight for over 6 months before being dumped in the insalubrious, squalid, and cramped Kondegi prison. The Nigerian and Cameroon authorities violated relevant fundamental human rights. These rights are enshrined in the constitution of each of these countries, and they are also enshrined in various international instruments duly ratified by each country, the 1951 Refugees Convention and the OAU Convention governing the specific aspects of refugee problems in Africa. 1969/1974. The deprivation of the liberty of these gentlemen and their systematic torture are violation of the rights and freedoms guaranteed under international law. In particular, they are in violation of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, and many others. The big worry, as was expressed during last night's debate, is what, how, why. No single Ambazonia is satisfied with the reasons why President Sisiku convened the emergency meeting in Nera Hotel. According to Barrister Frunso, counsel to Nera 10, the victims met at the Nera Hotel on the invitation of Tam Milan. Intelligence has it that Milan is married to the niece of Carlson Ayangwe. That could probably be the reason Ayangwe victim. Many Ambazonians have been wondering why he was absent, because prior to that time, he would also to Sisiko Julius Ayuk Tabe. It is worthy to note that Professor Carlson Ayangwe was amongst the masterminds of the fourth conclave in Zaria that led to the creation of the interim government and the interim constitution. In fact, Barrister Timin Besea was critical on the aspect, the reason why Carlson Ayangwe was mute during the crisis ignited by coup plotters last year in yet a mystery to many. Now, Barrister Fru believes that Ayangwe is also jealous because he didn't emerge or wasn't selected as a president when the former was picked in Nera Hotel. That can only explain why he would notably make derogatory, preposterous, and unintellectual statements about the present interim government led by Dr. Samuel Ikome Sako. The question to Professor Ayangwe is, since when did he realize the idea was wrong for revolution? How come all his know-how to prosecute a liberation movement had a U-turn only when his puppet Sisiku was out of the picture? With this, you can only agree with those who think he doesn't possess the moral authority to question, instruct, or advise strategic moves of the interim government. Now, we are told that Professor Ayangwe was making such statements from Canada. Is it a way of acknowledging that the Canada Conference or Grand National Monologue is really laughable, at the same time vexing? Carlson Ayangwe wants to raise funds for the Amazonian Restoration Forces. Are we being serious about this? But Barrister Nso thinks that he should stay clear of that activity. He says Ayangwe should stay clear from the Amazonian Restoration fighters because he has not been part of the struggle for so long. This is what Barrister Nso noted. Now, tonight we will get the interim government positions as we talk with the Secretary of State for Communications and IT, Secretary Martin Mungwa.
We the people, ABC Amber TV, Ambazonia Broadcasting Corporation. The voice of the voiceless, the voice of Ambazonia, connecting the world from Africa. With untold stories, Africa's best.
Now, also yesterday during exclusive discussion with Tarpadi King, where we had this amazing panelist, there was a scan through the war in Ambazonia from a legal perspective from 2018 until now, which I gave you a tip of. And now during this ongoing war in Ambazonia, as was said, the interim government has cautioned the technical apparatus of the Amazonian Restoration Forces on the ground and read some of their rage. Amazonian Restoration Forces defending Ambazonia has not gone extreme in doing so, defending Ambazonia, because they are trying to abide by the law. But the fact that they are facing an enemy that is lawless and does the extreme, pulling outrightly outrageous stunts and barbaric acts, the Amazonian Restoration Forces would have to bring in an offensive aspect, as said yesterday. The La République du Cameroon armies, who happen to be the enemy, organized and supposedly trained, yet they go overboard, breaking all military protocols, violating human rights, and worse. And we've seen a lot of these, down to not just innocent people being killed indiscriminately, but to children also being killed. The new code activated shows it's time to dismantle the oppressor and enemy from within their ranks. If the world doesn't listen to Amazonia and come to our aid timely enough, then we may just have to escalate the rate. We have seen the feats of Amazonian restoration forces. Since the Lava Storm 3 began, we've also brought to you a series of videos of the Amazonian Restoration Forces, even yesterday using their IEDs, improvised explosive devices, on the enemy in live recorded battles and gunshots exchanged between both parties in security status updates. It is a war, and so we have also seen a couple of deaths on our Amazonian Restoration Forces. But this revolution has indeed attracted more sympathizers than it did 5 years ago. Although we learned yesterday from the table of the panelists that the ADF under Choayaba has killed more Amazonian restoration fighters than the colonial forces. There are some people in the diaspora who were encouraging them to go after fighters who are not under them. Well, the question is, why leave the oppressor to fight another that is defending the people of Amazonia? Why not put all of that energy in defeating the enemy? Instead of reducing your strength, well, accept you are the enemy yourself. That is the only way you can do that. Else, it is only wise to know, in the meantime, that those who are fighting against the enemy should not be your enemy. And Amazonians, especially the Amazonian Restoration Forces, are advised to stay away from these evil machinations. Now, from all we heard yesterday during Tar Party King's program and all we've seen here on Undaunted, we say so far the Amazonian Restoration Forces have been doing a good job. But now the interim government believes it is time for a change in the ground game, time to up their game every way. The Secretary of State for Defense and Special Operations, Sylvester Zama, gave some candid advice to the soldiers on the home front, letting them understand that they have to comport themselves as soldiers. They are protectors of our citizens and are valiant soldiers who are defenders of our liberty and independence. They cannot put a gun or bullet on any of our citizens, not to mention our fighters. And we'll have to go through some rule of law and rules of engagement. Now, citing some words from Nijo yesterday, the pro-action is quiet on home ground now, but resources will be needed to match the actions expected. Remarkably stated, there is a time to destroy in order to build again. Destroying the Franco-Cameroon hegemony that has been planted on our national territory unapologetically is the new ground game in motion. Because we want to build a new Amazonia that will be the cradle of Africa.
We the people, ABC Amber TV, Amazonia Broadcasting Corporation. The voice of less, the voice of Amazonia, connecting world from Africa with stories, Africa's best.
All right, now looking at the foreign scenes, Ukraine puts forward unrealistic conditions for peace. Ukraine put forward unrealistic, Russia's foreign minister has said. Speaking to reporters in Bali, Indonesia, Mr. Lavrov said he had been in talks with the leaders of France and Germany on the conflict in Ukraine before going on to accuse Kiev of dragging out any possible resolutions. Now, he claimed Ukraine was refusing to talk to Moscow and had put forward unrealistic conditions for peace. See President Zelensky's previous post, you heard that. And the Kremlin official also said that the UN had promised to move obstacles to the export of Russian grain and fertilizers. Russia has long complained of barriers to its farm exports, even though they are not directly targeted by Western sanctions. In spite of the problems, Mr. Lavrov said Russia had already exported 10.5 million tons of grains, mainly wheat, of which 60% had gone to Asia and 40% had gone to Africa. Quote, I hope these promises will be fulfilled. At least the UN Secretary General gave me his sworn assurance that this is a priority issue for him, he added. Yesterday, the Indonesian authorities said Mr. Lavrov had been taken to hospital after his arrival in Bali for the G20 summit. Wayan Koster, the governor of Bali, said he had been taken in for a checkup at the Sangla Hospital in the provincial capital, Denpasar, was immediately returned. 3 other Indonesian government and medical officials also said he was being treated on the resort island. However, the Russian Foreign Ministry dismissed claims that he had been in hospital as fake news. Zelensky out Ukraine's 10-point peace plan and rules out Minsk III deal. We are getting a bit more on President Volodymyr Zelensky's speech at the G20 summit in Bali. Now, during his virtual address, the leader presented a 10-point plan for peace with Russia. He also said there would be no Minsk III deal to end the fighting in Ukraine. The Minsk deal agreements were a series of international agreements which sought to end the Donbass war, and his statement refers to 2 failed ceasefire deals between Kiev and Moscow over the status of the region. We will not allow Russia to wait, build up its forces, and then start a new series of terror and global destabilization. There will be no Minsk III, which Russia will violate immediately after the agreement. And this is what Mr. Zelensky had to say. Mr. Zelensky's 10-point plan for peace are 1. Radiation safety and nuclear weapons. 2. Safety. 3. Energy security. 4. Release of prisoners and internees, and 5. Implementation of the UN Charter. 6. Withdrawal of Russian troops and cessation of hostilities. 7. Justice. 8. Ecocide and environmental protection. 9. Escalation prevention. 10. Confirmation of the end of the war. What is quite interesting to me is how Putin would go any extra mile to have his way. According to latest updates, Putin signs decree allowing dual citizens in Russia to be drafted in army. President Vladimir has signed a decree allowing Russians who have dual citizenship to serve in the country's armed forces, the Moscow Times reported. Now, the amended decree now means those with permanent residency status in foreign countries can be conscripted into the military. Dual nationals were previously exempted from the conscription. And for context, in September, President Vladimir Putin ordered a partial mobilization in Russia as the country faced military setbacks in Ukraine and said the additional manpower was needed to win a war not only against Ukraine but also in Western backers. Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu said Russia will draft 300,000 reservists to support its military campaign. The move was Russia's first mobilization since the Second World War. According to the decree published on the Kremlin's website, the call-up would only apply to reservists with previous military experience. However, in the months that followed, reports began to emerge that Russia was allegedly rounding up homeless people and sending them to the front lines. A Kyiv-based charity group, Food Not Bombs, told the independent Russian news outlet that it had seen dozens of homeless men being taken off the streets to and offices. Ukrainian soldiers believe Kherson liberation is only the beginning of our big victory. Now that Ukraine has taken back Kherson city, some of its soldiers are on an emotional high. Military volunteer Siva Koshel, speaking on our Ukraine War Diaries podcast, said he had visited a hospital for injured soldiers in Kyiv and that the mood there had been really optimistic. When you are visiting this kind of place, you have so many of our guys, officers, and soldiers with our arms, legs heavily injured. But there is an atmosphere of drama. The atmosphere in hospital anywhere is really good. It is really optimistic. And even these injured guys, they are in a good mood and they're smiling. And of course, we have discussed the Kherson situation. And all of us, we believe that it is only the beginning of our big victory, he says. Indonesia's Widodo calls on G20 to work to end the war. The Indonesian president appears to reference Russia's invasion of Ukraine as he opens a key global summit in Bali. We'll have Gabellison tell us more.
Indonesian President Joko Widodo has opened the G20 summit in Bali with a call for the world to end the war and bridge wide differences amid rifts over Russia's invasion of Ukraine, which has fueled geopolitical tension and caused a global surge in food and energy prices. Telling delegates that it was an honor for Indonesia to host the event, Widodo, popularly known as Jokowi, on Tuesday acknowledged the mood. "I understand we need huge efforts to be able to sit together in this room," he said, before closed-door discussions. The Indonesian president said the world could not afford to fall into another Cold War and said G20 members must work to end the war, in an apparent reference to the war in Ukraine. Being responsible means creating not zero-sum situations. Being responsible here also means that we must end the war. If the war doesn't end, it will be difficult for the world to move forward, he told leaders ahead of the summit's opening session. The G20 groups together 19 countries and the European Union, representing the world's 20 largest economies, including Russia. It accounts for more than 80% of the world's gross domestic product and 60% of its population. Indonesia has sought to be a bridge builder, and the summit is the first since Moscow sent its troops into Ukraine on February 24th. Jokowi has visited Kyiv and Moscow, extending an invitation to Russian President Vladimir Putin, despite calls within the G20 that Russia be barred. Putin declined and is being represented in Bali by Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov. Uncertainty over communique. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, meanwhile, addressed the summit by video link on Tuesday. On the eve of the summit opening, he pointedly referred to the G19 summit and in his speech later called for peace. On the 9th of this month of November, it was reported by Sky News that Ukraine wants G20 help on Russian deportations of children. Kyiv says thousands of its children have been taken illegally to Russia and that deportation should be investigated. Ukraine wants this month's G20 summit to address the plight of thousands of its children it says have been deported to Russia. President Volodymyr Zelensky's chief of staff has said. The Russian Federation continues to commit its crimes in connection with Ukrainian children. Zelensky's office quoted Andriy Yermak as saying on Tuesday at a meeting he chaired of a group of officials responsible for child protection. The United States envoy to the United Nations said in early September, more than 1,800 children had been transferred to Russia from Moscow-controlled areas of in July alone. Ukraine wants such deportations investigated as a war crime. The statement from Zelensky's office said Ukraine's National Information Bureau showed 10,500 children had been deported or forcibly displaced. Ukraine's minister, responsible for integrating Russian territories, noted at a meeting that only 96 children had been returned. Last month, Kyiv said it was working to bring back 32 children it said had been forcibly removed from their parents and illegally adopted in Russia. Yermak was quoted as saying Ukraine could count on UN help, but he restated Ukraine's lack of confidence in assistance from the International Committee of the Red Cross, ICRC. Unfortunately, due to the very passive position of international organizations, in particular the ICRC, today we're unable to determine the exact number, how many, and where our children are, he said. Yermak said discussions about the return of the children should start at a Group of 20 summit, which starts in Indonesia on November 15th. Zelensky is expected to attend the meeting remotely. It was reported, although Ukraine is not a member, it was reported this week that Russian President Vladimir Putin might not attend, despite Russia being part of the grouping. We really need to draw the world's attention to what is happening because this is an absolute genocide of Ukrainians, Ukrainian children, our country, Yermak said. Russia has previously said it is offering humanitarian aid to those wishing to flee Ukraine voluntarily, with the Russian ambassador to the UN saying the kidnapping allegation a new milestone in the disinformation campaign by Western nations. Gab Ellison reporting for Undaunted, ABC Amba News.
Now, Manchester United forward Cristiano Ronaldo says the club's owner, the Glazer family, quote, don't care about the club on the sporting side. Ronaldo made headlines after telling Talk TV he felt betrayed by the club, and another section of that interview was released on Monday night. And we'll have Gab listen tell us more.
World sports. Football. Cristiano Ronaldo says Glazers don't care about Manchester United. Manchester United forward Cristiano Ronaldo says the club's owners, the Glazer family, don't care about the club on the sporting side. Ronaldo made headlines after telling Talk TV he felt betrayed by the club, and another section of that interview was released on Monday night. Manchester are a marketing club. They get money from the marketing, he said. It will be hard for Manchester to be top of the game in the next 2 or 3 years. The 37-year-old Portugal forward, who has only scored one Premier League goal this season, said the owners of the club, the Glazers, don't care about the club, professional sport. Ronaldo added that he has never met the Glazers, who took over the club in 2005. United's only public response to the Ronaldo interview was issued earlier on Monday, when the club said Manchester United puts the media coverage regarding an interview by Cristiano Ronaldo. The club will consider its response after the full facts have been established. Our focus remains on preparing for the second half of the season and continuing the momentum, belief, and togetherness being built among the players, manager, staff, and fans. Manchester United has not won a trophy since claiming the Europa League title in 2017, and fans have staged a number of protests against the Glazers' running of the club. The fans are always right, said Portugal captain Ronaldo. They should know the truth. I want the best for the club. This is why I came to Manchester United. This is why I love this club. You have some things inside the club which don't help Manchester reach the top level like City, Liverpool, and even now Arsenal. It's complicated, it's difficult, it's hard. Neville and Rooney, not my friends. On the Sunday section of the interview, Ronaldo was asked if he was angry that he had been criticized by former United teammate Wayne Rooney, who now manages DC United. Ronaldo said, "Probably, because he finished his career in his 30s, so I'm still playing at a high level. I'm not going to say that I'm looking better than him, which is true, but in Monday's segment, he turned his attention to another former United colleague, Gary Neville. He recently blanked the former England right back, who was working as a Sky Sport pundit. It's hard to listen to that kind of criticism and negativity about people who play with you. For example, Gary Neville as well. They are not my friends," said Ronaldo. "It's easy to criticize. I don't know if you have a job in television that they must criticize to be more famous. I really don't understand. I think they take advantage of my profile because they are not stupid. It's hard when you see people who were in the dressing room with you criticizing that way." Tennis. ATP Finals 2022. Novak Djokovic wins opener against Stefanos Tsitsipas. And former world number 1 Novak Djokovic beat second seed Stefanos Tsitsipas in 2 tight sets in his opening match of the ATP Finals in Turin. The 35-year-old Serb overcame Tsitsipas of Greece 6-4, 7-6, 7-4. Djokovic is seeking to equal Roger Federer's record of 6 victories in the season-ending tournament. Earlier in the same group, Russian Andrei Rublev came from a set down to beat compatriot Daniil Medvedev 6-7, 7-9, 6-3, 7-6, 9-7. Rublev, seeded 6th, held his nerve in a final set tiebreak to overcome the 4th seed after squandering 7 set points in the opening set. On Sunday, Rafael Nadal's latest bid to finally land the first ATP Finals title of his career started with a defeat by American 8th seed Taylor Fritz. Top seed Nadal will face Canadian Felix Auger-Aliassime in his second Green Group round-robin match on Tuesday. The touring tournament sees 8 of the year's best men's players split into 2 groups of 4, with the top 2 qualifying for the semi-finals. Meanwhile, Great Britain's Neil Skupski and Dutch partner Wes Koolhof won their first men's doubles match 7-6, 7-3, 4-6, 10-5 against Australian duo Nick Kyrgios and Thanasi Kokkinakis. The pair have enjoyed incredible success in their first year together, winning 7 titles, which have included Masters 1,000 victories in Madrid, Montreal, and Paris, and finishing 2022 as year-end world number 1s. Gab Ellison reporting from Daunted, ABC Amber News.
You're welcome back. As I told you, it's going to be an interesting time tonight in the State of the Liberation Movement with the mouthpiece of the interim government, Martin Mungwa, PhD, F.ASCE, Fellow of the American Society of Civil Engineers. As we look at La République du Cameroon's last hope, defeated but unrelenting. La République du Cameroon's one-item agenda from the failed cubic monologue sealed under a secret oath. Right now, we're going to be moving into the office of the Secretary of State for Communications and IT, Martin Mungwa.
Greeting Ambazonians, welcome to this program on November 14th, 2022. Today's topic is La République's last hope, defeated but unrelenting. La République du Cameroon's one-item agenda from the failed Quebec monologue, sealed under a secret oath. Dear Ambazonians and members of the international community, on behalf of your interim government led by Dr. Samuel Ekomesako, I want to extend a 21-gun salute to all valiant Ambazonia restoration forces in the home front, those preparing for self-defense duties elsewhere, and those in transit to the home front to protect Ambazonians from the state terrorists of La République du Cameroon. To all Ambazonians everywhere and sympathizers in the diaspora who continue to support the suffering people of Ambazonia at home. We of the interim government do not forget, will never forget, and honor our brave people in these challenging times. In the past several weeks, we have talked about Dictator Paul Biya's monologue in Quebec, why the dictator Paul Biya's government selected Quebec, what dictator Paul Biya does not understand about the status of Quebec as a French-speaking place, and how the bilingual French-English Canadian Federation serves its public decently and is not the failed Cameroon's federation. We concluded that Canada is a beautiful country in North America. Canada is a place where the obligation on federal employees to serve the Canadian public is in either French or English is an obligation of all government workers. In the failed Cameroon Federation, the state imposes French on federal institutions by decrees and administrative measures. We shall not accept. Canada is not a place where public officials seek reverence, nor a place where one subculture, English or French, seeks to dominate the other. In the failed Cameroon Federation, French-speaking Cameroon implemented Article 6.1 of the December 26, 1959 Accords to annex federal employees, forcing all to speak and read only in French. Even bilingual money became francophonized as English text was deleted from all notes. As a matter of fact, the strength of Ambazonia restoration forces has in recent times forced Yaoundé and France-Afrique, teleguided by the presidency of France, to now announce new money with subtitles in English. Bullies truly reign in the land of weaklings. Let me take this chance to tell President Macron and his empire in Africa that this is a distraction. Though French-speaking Quebec was militarily defeated in the 17th century wars between France and the British Empire, the people of Quebec are dignified Canadians and refused through two referendums to separate from Canada. Votes or free votes determine stable outcomes. Here, the people made their choice through free elections conducted only in Quebec because the issue affected only the regional autonomy of Quebec in the main. The sovereign people of Ambazonia have never been defeated militarily by La République du Cameroon, were never a colony of France, and have no treaty whatsoever with France. The indigenous people of Ambazonia demand a say in their future. We do not need the presidency of La République du Cameroon to decide for us and regret your condescending attitude. We are struggling and fighting for a free and sovereign Ambazonia as the 55th member state of the African Union and duly seated at the United Nations. Canada, including Quebec, is a sovereign country and has no cooperation accords or monetary cooperation treaties with any country of the old world. La République du Cameroon, on the other hand, has a December 26, 1959 treaty with France permitting the imperial power to take away 50% of the foreign earnings of Cameroon. This is unimaginable that to stay in power, an educated leader of La République du Cameroon must surrender to France half of the sovereign wealth of Cameroonians every year. According to figures from databases holding international trade data for countries of the world, La République du Cameroon's foreign trade amounted to $190 million in 1965. France at that time took away 80% or 157 million, which at an interest rate of 2% per year and over 57 years amounts to 450 million in 2022. Fellow Amazonians and the international community, La République paid to France 80% of her foreign earnings between 1961 and 1972, 65% of her foreign earnings in 1972, and in 1973 in Dakar, the tax was reduced to 50%. To manage these expropriations or transfers of Cameroonian wealth to Paris, France built a bank called BEAC, which is headquartered in Yaoundé, to expedite the transfers. Very few hand-picked Anglophone enablers work there. The president of the bank is always a Francophone trained in France. This does not happen in Quebec. Now, it is absolutely clear Biya's Quebec expedition was simply aimed at stealing another country's clean ropes to cover the stench he has wrapped himself and failed the Cameroon Federation. This attitude is Biya's most outstanding quality, since the French catapulted him to power with neither an agenda nor the will to govern. It is not therefore surprising that after 40 years in office, Mr. Biya is hell-bent to turn the failed federation into a kind of United Kingdom with his son succeeding him at the presidency. Fellow Ambazonians, we must remember that Mr. Biya's singular declaration of war on Ambazonia on the 30th of November 2017, in collusion with the French presidency, did not follow any democratic norm or process. True to form, there was no debate in the House of Assembly, no debate in the Senate, and no debate in the cabinet, and no debate on state media. Clearly, in keeping with the December 26, 1959 Accords, all La République du Cameroon institutions are simply rubber stamps and have no authority to resolve pertinent issues of state. Incidentally, as Mr. Biya's sycophants celebrate the 40th anniversary of the killer occupier of Ambazonia last week, the dictator himself was completely absent. Not surprising for an absentee president who still does not understand, after 47 years, that a government that is ruled on mutual suspicion and mistrust can never grow an economy that will serve a people. By all accounts, 2035 emergence is a pipe dream. This week, we will revisit President Sako's recent town hall meeting with the Ambazonian people, during which he echoed La République du Cameroon's last strategy to maintain a chokehold on Ambazonia using enablers in Kondengui prison and, at his prime minister's office, spoilers and sellouts in the country. La République du Cameroon's last hope, President Sako revealed, is to destroy anything and everything that the Ambazonians stand for. Democracy with no movement of filled ballot boxes by parliamentarians at night to make up numbers, freedom from the 1959 Accords, and complete sovereignty. And they believe that in targeting Dr. Sako and all those surrounding him will achieve the objective. The abysmal failure of the Quebec monologue compelled his planners to finally settle on one item agenda: create a secret unity platform for free flow of information between CPDM agents and enablers, with the objective to sell Ambazonia in exchange for liberty and cash. We are referring to individuals like Julius Ayuktabe and a handful of detainees and coup plotters, including Paul Tassong, Professor Anyangwe, Chris Anu, John Ba Akuro, Marianta, Paulinus Joa, etc. President Sako made crystal clear the main keywords that summarize the attitude of these spoilers: content and deed. He paraphrased We know these shenanigans not by the content of their speeches, but by the character of their deeds. Dear Amazonians, don't be deceived. These distractors will use language to capture you and deeds to derail you. Their words are like bait to the fishermen. The interim government toils day and night to develop debate, agree, and implement winning strategies towards our restoration and recognition. The enablers, of the other hand, the enablers, on the other hand, are busy looking for the buyers, making friends with the enemy, and reaching secret agreements under the table with La République du Cameroon agents. Remember, we in the interim government are defined more by our deeds than our words. All the allegations against Dr. Sacco have been baseless, be it Sacco's refusal to go to elections, yet they could not show where it is mentioned in the Constitution, or why Dr. Sacco should be impeached because he signed deals with La République du Cameroon, yet no iota of supporting evidence to date. Ambazonians are well informed that Dr. Sacco uh, of the interim government is the only leader able to raise funding to maintain a restoration quest shows that silent majority of the Amazonian diaspora votes with its purses and wallets. The enablers taking money from Yaoundé can only distract and delay our arrival in Boya, for enablers cannot stand the collective will of the indigenous people of Amazonia. The coup plotters continue to fail in regrets, but are thieves of intellectual property. Their most endearing claim to infamy is outright theft of anything IG built under the direction of President Sako, be it freedom bonds, the Treasury, APP Town Hall model, ARF logo, county and LGA structure, emblem, and so on. From all the so-called charges against Dr. Sako, that what have they done differently and better? The answer is nothing. That explains why they are intellectually inept, morally corrupt, and financially insolvent. They cannot lead, but are great spenders of treasury, be it packets of money, of cash from Yaoundé, small donations, and cash spirited from the IG led by Dr. Sako. The facts are now very clear. The Ambazonians elected Dr. Sako in February 2018 and reaffirmed the vote in November 2000 February 2018 and reaffirmed in November 2018. Now, enablers are using unorthodox means to confuse our ARFs through divide and conquer techniques which are doomed to fail. Dear Ambazonians, failure is not an option. The Kondengi faction and coup plotters have decided that independence is no longer on the agenda. They have shifted position, and that's why they were against the Swiss-led process, but endorsed the Grand National Dialogue and the Center for Dialogue and Negotiation in Canada. The Quebec monologue has three objectives, namely, break the IG away from the home front, destroy the ARFs loyal to the IG, and make everyone to believe that Dr. Sako and the IG are the problem. Fellow Ambazonians, this is a distraction to evade the bipartisan United States Senate Resolution 684 calling for unconditional roundtable talks with mediator and guarantors to resolve root causes. It is in the lawless modus operandi of the French-speaking political leadership of the seceded La République du Cameroon to avoid debate and common sense. Ambazonians do not want conflict with La République du Cameroon. The war of Ambazonian independence rises out of the lawlessness of La République du Cameroon vis-à-vis UN Resolution 1608, Article 4B of the African Union Constitutive Act and other international obligations in an illogical quest supported by France to expand France-Afrique. Our message is today geared towards the home front and the ARFs. We must be very watchful and follow the IG directions. While we are pursuing diplomatic means to gain recognition, we are not letting off other options. 8 million Ambazonians cannot be derailed by a handful of spoilers, enablers, coup plotters, and sellouts. We of the IG cannot sit by and watch. It is history repeating itself, fellow Ambazonians. Remember that in World War II, Nazi Germany invaded captured and attempted to annex France in the summer of 1940. What then happened was shocking. Nazi Germany then established a proxy Vichy government to govern France, teleguided from Berlin. One strong man, then a major in the defeated French army and popularly called General Charles de Gaulle, and his nationalist followers escaped across the English Channel to Great Britain. While in London, President Charles de Gaulle organized the resistance under a Free France movement and could address the beleaguered French people over the BBC radio from London. When the Vichy government collapsed with the liberation of France in August 1944, all enablers also fell, and Charles de Gaulle led the interim government of France to organize France in the run up to elections. The will of the French people prevailed. So it will be in Ambazonia. All enablers failed, defeated by the Amber Spirit. Long live the Federal Republic of Ambazonia. Short live the revolution. The Almighty God willing. Thank you, and over to you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Martin. Thank you so much, Dr. Martin Mungwa. It's nice to have you here, of course. And that's a very, very comprehensive speech you gave there, amazing one. We already have a couple of questions here on Undaunted. In your speech this evening, you talked about the cubic monologue, and you said it has three objectives, namely breaking the interim government away from the home front, destroying the Amazonian restoration forces loyal to the interim government, and making everyone believe that Dr. Sacco and the interim government are the problem. For all we know, the interim government led by Dr. Samuel Ikome Sacco is doing really amazing. As the spokesperson of the interim government, what do they stand to gain doing this?
Thank you. That's a very important question. And that question actually conceals a lot of strategy, or how do I put it? Um, what's the word? The playbook of La République du Cameroon. Whatever La République du Cameroon is doing today is not different. It's not something that they simply just hashed. It is a recycling of tactics that La République du Cameroon has used over the years, starting uh, 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 with West Cameroon under John Foncha, when they sort of literally removed him from office and brought somebody they believed that he can be manipulated, and that ultimately was St. Mona. St. Mona was promised that he was going to be the next of kin once Ahijo retired, but of course, at the eve of his possible retirement or being kicked out of office, the tables were turned and Biya became the prime minister, and the rest is history. Now, why do I tell you this story? That's exactly what the La République du Cameroon government, that's the plan they have. They are trying to manipulate, give people like Professor Anyangwe that these are the people they have to trust, and Cho Ayaba and the others. But once they have them, when they succeed to derail this movement, there will come a point where they will just make sure that these people are totally irrelevant, and they will change and go back to the system that prevailed for the past 40 or 61 years. That is the modus operandi of La République du Cameroon. And if any Ambazonian who is more than 40 or 50 years old doesn't understand this game, then I'm sure that we sort of mentally, I don't know how to put it, we are sort of mad. Because that has always been the case. La République does that all the time, over and over again. They did that to the UNDP when Samuel, what is his name again? Samuel, sorry, I've forgotten the other name, was head of the UNDP. And what did they do? They brought in Maigari Buba Bello. They changed, and they made sure that, Samuel was no longer the leader of the UNDP party, and make sure that everything just came back to normal. La République always tries to replace the head of political parties, or they will go behind the scene and bribe those who are on your list, and at the end of the day, you'll be the person probably holding your position. They did that with the SDF. They created a so-called meeting with the SDF to see how they can change the constitution or how they can change the electoral law. In the process of doing that, they gotten in contact with all the bigwigs in the SDF party. So what happened? They bribed all of them, and ultimately Frundi was left alone. Okay. I remember, I think Samuel Eboa. Yes, I think that's the leader of the UNDP at that time. When they discovered Samuel Eboa was so powerful, they made sure that he was replaced and Buba Bello came in. Buba Bello has been head of the UNDP till today as we speak, and he's totally ineffective and absolutely useless to whoever he reports to as members of his party. So that is the modus operandi. So coming to the case of the IG, now that La Republique realizes that it is impossible, it's impossible for them to bribe Dr. Sako. Anybody who's around him, what do? They ultimately came to the conclusion that let us send out these people that we met with in Quebec. Let them go out there and take hold of the ARFs, deceive the people, give them money, call them one by one, and promise them anything that they ask for. But the idea is when that is successful, I can assure you, even Professor Anyangwe, they will never talk to him. Remember, when S.T. Muna was the leader of the speaker of the parliament, when it came to the time when Ahidjo was going to go on retire, when Ahidjo was removed, of course he was agitating. He wanted to know, isn't this the time I have to be president? Even when Biya came to power, he made sure that he never spoke to him until he went on retirement. There was complete cut off in communication. He did the same with Django Fancha. These miserable ambassadors came back home until they died. They never saw the head of state because they knew exactly the questions that they were going to ask Biya, and Biya knew he had deceived them. That is the modus operandi of France. That's the modus operandi of La République du Cameroon. And it's very important that ambassadors understand this. We cannot deal with these people. You cannot go into the room hoping that these are gentlemen to talk to. It's not going to work. I hope I've answered that question sufficiently well. Over to you.
All right, thank you so much, Dr. Martin Mungwa. Well, whatever the gimmicks, the facts are very clear already. Like you stated, Amazonians elected Dr. Sako in February 2018 and reaffirmed the vote in November 2017. But Joe, why do you think enablers are using unorthodox means to confuse our Amazonian restoration forces? Particularly the Amazonian Restoration Forces. Do you have any thoughts as to why the enablers would be doing this?
Well, I think it's a very simple answer. They're just losers. And they also fail to understand that in this fight to gain our sovereignty, it is not because you had been in the fight for 40 years that guarantees you to continue to the end. There will be a time when other people will take over. And I think that's the beauty of a revolution of this nature. Even in democratic governments, you have young men who rise up and take over leadership. You wouldn't be there and said, oh, I have been in government for the past 40 years and there's no way I can let a young man take over. You see, these are all attitudes of La République du Cameroon. And that's why you have these cronies who've been in power for 60 years and they still want to stay in power. Can't people learn from the world around? Look at somebody like President Obama. He was in power. This is somebody who was old enough to be Biden's son, but he was accepted as the leader of the Democratic Party. And he was president for 8 years and turned over and gave it to somebody who had been in government when I believe Obama was probably still in either in primary school or in college. That is how democracy works. It's not a function of age. It's a function of the ability to have knowledge that can advance society. It's a function of the ability of leadership, how to recognize the challenges of the people and to lead them in the right direction. That's why Dr. Sako is the leader of the Amazonian people. It's not about, I had put in 40 years, or I have put in 32 years, or I cannot listen to Dr. Sako because Dr. Sako is Johnny Just Come. Can you imagine what an insult it is? When we are looking for innovative minds, we're looking for people who can change the world in every aspect of human endeavor. Ambazonians are thinking about age, how they've been in the revolution uh, for much longer time than others. We are being threatened by climate change. We are being threatened by rising oceans. We are being threatened by increasing temperature. Ambazonians are only thinking about how old they are. Can you imagine if we have to depend on these people, whom I believe they are sterile and totally useless? The world is doomed. We cannot accept that. When we find people who are knowledgeable, who have the tools to lead our country to sovereignty, I will be the first to support them. And even it means me losing my position as Secretary of State for Communication, I will happily do that and give it to somebody who can do the job better than I can. Thank you.
Actually, this is what it's supposed to be about. Actually, this is really what it's supposed to be about. Whoever said leadership or politics, it should be about years of actually doing nothing. That's not supposed to be the case. Well, we also brought a report today. Well, more like in our executive summary, we gave to you an excerpt from Nelson Uchiba, and he had this to say in regards to the years. It's not about the years, but your achievement, your works. What has people seen you do? And this is what Nelson Uchiba had to say. He says, these are facts, not humor. World fastest men's 100-meter. One, Usain Bolt, 9.58 arrived. Two, Tyson Gay, 9.69 arrived. Three, Johan Blake, 9.69 arrived. Amazonian struggle race record. Carlsin Ayangwe, 40 years, delayed and failed. Two, Cho Ayaba, 32 years, delayed and failed. Three, Akwanga E, 32 years, delayed and failed. For Dr. Sacco, 5 years, cruising to Boya. 5, Marianta, 6 months, crashed already and failed. 6, Chris Ano, 2 months, crashed, crumbled and failed. 7, Ayuk Tabe, 3 months, surrendered and failed. 8, La Republic of Cameroon, 52 years, attempt to assimilate that has failed. This was from Nelson Utiba. He says, so Dr. Sacco is cruising to Boya. All enablers should clear the road or be cleared. Number of years is not what matters, but smart people take few years, like the athletes mentioned above. So that really correlates with what you said. But moving on, we have a lot of other concerns, especially as regards to your topic for today. I mean, you said it is La Republic du Cameroon's last chance. Why do you think so?
Well,
Okay, so I'm going to ask that again just in case you didn't get that. La
thanks.
Republic de
Well,
Cameroon's last hope, defeated but unrelenting. This is your title for today. You said last hope. Why do you think it is La Republic de Cameroon's last hope?
it was meant to be a little bit sarcastic and sort of a satire. Of course, as I mentioned in my previous reports, La Republique never sleeps. And listen to me. Just listen to what is happening. La République du Cameroon expelled Médecins Sans Frontières, that's the Doctors Without Borders, out of Amazonia. These were people who were providing health care to our people. La République expelled them. La République attacks and kills doctors and nurses who treat our wounded soldiers. And can you imagine that La République wants to go to Amazonia to vaccinate everybody? You think that is a good move? I mean, it is mind-boggling that La République, as I told you, these people, I call them, they have reptilian instincts. If you understand what the meaning of that word is, they have reptilian instincts. Now they have transformed, they think, now that they've discovered that the Quebec monologue is likely and it's already failed, they have already hatched another plan to go and vaccinate our people. I hope Ambazonians are listening. This is a no, no, no as far as the interim government is concerned. Whoever is going to be vaccinated by La République, you are doing that at your own risk. That is the plan. We had cholera outbreak, monkeypox. What did they do? COVID-19 has been with us since 2019. It is 3 years and counting. And it's only now that La Republic thinks that everybody must be vaccinated against COVID-19. What happened in the 3 years? What happened to the funding? Are you sure those drugs are legitimate drugs that they want to inject in our population? Do these people like us from all that they've been doing, all the massacres that have been recorded in the past 5 years by La Republic of Cameroon? Have they given accountability for all those actions? And now they want to vaccinate every Amazonian. This is a big warning. And I hope the Department of Health and Social Services will take upon itself to educate Amazonians not to go to such events or any of those vaccination sessions. Because this is really time we have to be very careful. They will use every method to come into our country. This is a no-no. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Martin Mungwa. Well, the funny thing is, the one thing Amazonians have asked of La Republic du Cameroon, they failed to give it. I mean, even the other thing they say, the first thing, I mean, a lot of things they've asked, I can't even think of one right now, is it the roads they've asked that has caused a lot of accidents that the La Republic du Cameroon has blatantly refused to work on, or is it the not killing innocent people, or to stop burning villages, or to allow them have access to good hospitals and basic infrastructures that they have refused to give for decades? And all of a sudden, you're forcing people to get a vaccine. Like you said, they haven't even proven to them that they first like them, which is really not something that can be proven, because every other act of them have proven a lot of hate and absolute hatred. So they cannot all of a sudden want to do good with vaccines. Like you said, what is in this vaccine? It is rather very ironic what they impose on the peoples of Amazonia. And like you said, only a fool would want to accept that kind of gesture. Only a fool would want to do that. Well, moving on, we have something that would like you to say. Observing, you unwaveringly spoke about Siseko Julius Ayuk faction in Kundegi, and you said he has given up on our independence, and aside from their current involvement with the Quebec monologue, what else can you use to justify your conviction about what you said?
Well, this is the action of Ayuk, Julius Ayuk Tabe. It's historical. We've all documented his actions. The first is when he went to Vaudier with La République du Cameroun, claiming that they were going to negotiate. And of course, it's a picture opportunity for La République to take pictures and send to the international community to make them believe that La République was actually negotiating. But of course, when it fell flat on his face, they started thinking about a different posture. But the simple question is, how do you negotiate with a prisoner? How can you take somebody hostage and negotiate with them? In what country on earth do you have that sort of disposition where you go in, you incarcerate somebody, you give him life imprisonment, and then you say, oh, I want to negotiate with him? Even Nelson Mandela, he had to be released in prison before they can talk of any negotiations with the apartheid government. I don't know how this government operates, if it is not just a junta. And they just feel that they can do anything to tell the international community that something is happening. You cannot be negotiating while a prisoner. The Ayuk Tabe and whoever is supporting him should make it very clear. Tell La République du Cameroun, I'm of no use to you because I'm a prisoner. Except they're just being greedy to feel that they can use the sovereignty of Amazonia in exchange for freedom and cash. And that's exactly what they went to do in Canada. How can you pull people from prison to send them to Canada to negotiate with you? That is the same situation that Nazi Germany put the Vichy government. And Charles de Gaulle was smart enough to say, no, we cannot accept it. By the time the war came to a close, Vichy government was collaborating with Nazi Germany. They were taking orders from Berlin. And from that experience, they think that they can extend it to Amazonia. They are only copying what the Germans did to them. And that's what La Republique intends to do with Amazonia. And Dr. Sacco is saying no, because the historical precedents. We know that this happened in history. We are not going to fall prey to that. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Dr. Martin Mungwa. Thank you so much. That's a very, very precise answer there, because there's something I also have in regards to the enablers. Well, yesterday, first off, we gave a report, a worrisome report, that 72 corpses, 137 injured from gunshots in 9 months in a single hospital. And that is just one hospital in Bamenda. Okay, so we gave this report of 72 corpses, 137 injured from gunshots in 9 months in a single hospital. That is one hospital in Bamenda. And also we've seen the evil on southern Cameroon's Amazonia, which enablers, which eventually get to enablers who choose to support this wrong persons. Now, the question we're going to ask is, in all of this and the enablers, funding this evil struggle that is not in the end going to benefit them, what do you have to say to them? Is there anything you think we could, any kind of dialogue we think we could have with these people for them to realize that in the end, they're not just undoing Amazonians, but also themselves? Because, I mean, when La Republique du Cameroon is done with every other Amazonians, even those who do not want to associate or help them in destroying Amazonians, they would not be left out. Is there anything we could do to convince them to come to the light?
Well, I think it is very simple. They have seen how this revolution has progressed over the past 5 years, and it's actually becoming very clear now. There's no way that La Republique can win in this war, and it's also time for those enablers to start thinking that whatever they are doing is going to come back and haunt them. This is not the only country where enablers have been called to explain their actions during a time of war like this. Whether you take Indonesia or you take France, okay? Um, those who read World Affairs understand, like I did World Affairs, so I'm well aware of what happened after the war. So it is not far fetched, and they should all understand that what they are doing, they are literally shooting their feet, and it's not going to work unless they have to migrate into to La Republique. But let me tell you, let me caution them now: you will be, uh, you will never be accepted. You will never be at home in La Republique du Cameroon. So it is time, and it is time for most or all of these enablers to stop what they are doing and to understand that La Republique has no way, there's no way they are going to hold us captive for the next, 61 years. And the fact of the matter is that when we get our independence, there are lots of things that will have to happen to put our society right. And it is very important that everybody understands the importance of sovereignty and to defend our sovereignty like most Ambazonians are doing. And I take this opportunity to thank the Ambazonian people for their bravery. These are extremely brave people, and you've demonstrated over the past 5 years that this restoration effort is top on the agenda of every Amazonian, and we are here to make sure that we handle the diplomatic part, and ultimately we are going to have our sovereignty. Thank you, and over to you.
Ultimately, we will have our sovereignty. Well, for all we know, Dr. Martin, the bilingual French, English, Canadian Federation serves its public decently and is not the failed Cameroon's federation. And it's hard for La Republic of Cameroon to learn anything good, but is there any chance that they could learn from the Canadian Federation?
No, they cannot. They cannot learn
What
because La
exactly?
République is a vassal state. It is controlled by the presidency of France. I don't be surprised that at the presidency they have duplicate prime minister or president of every francophone nation. These are the people who control these countries, and there's no way La République leaders can decide that we have to behave like Canada. But because if they do that, they are going to lose their positions because all of them, they are not qualified even to be teachers in the kindergarten. I will not risk my dog being handled by these people. They are totally heartless. These people are inhumane. They are savages. They are not supposed to be in government. But of course, these are the type of people who qualify to rule in French Africa because that's what the French want. They want people who will take orders without question. They want people who can even kill their parents in the name of France. And I can assure you that most of them, if not all of them, they have French passports. So they're actually Frenchmen acting on behalf of the French Republic. So how do you expect people like that to change? They cannot change. It's like an old tree. You can't bend it.
Very sad. Anyways, I think it's at this point I let the audience know that today is that one day to put your thoughts in, to put your question. We have, I mean, the mouthpiece of the interim government to answer every of your question. And we'd like you to know that the numbers are on the screen, as you can see, so you could do well to dial in and have your questions across. In the meantime, still wondering about a lot of things. We've given a lot of reports here only yesterday and today. We've also seen the Amazonian Restoration Forces, their feats. They've done a lot of things in since the lava storm 3 kicked off. They've been doing a lot to defend the people of Amazonia. And your report was solely around them in a way. What do you have to say about the Amazonian Restoration Forces so far since the lava storm 3?
That's the pride of Amazonian people. And you can see why La République du Cameroon, they're shivering when you talk about the ARFs. And that's why they're doing everything they can in order to cut off the ARFs from the interim government. That is not going to happen. Uh, the ARFs are the pride of the Amazonian people. And these soldiers will form, they constitute our national army. And you can see that from all the actions that they've been able to do under the leadership, the commander in chief, Dr. Samuel Sako, the strategies that he has developed to disrupt, enemy battlefield vulnerabilities, to exploit, battlefield vulnerabilities. It is thanks to Dr. Sako and the fact that these soldiers were able to implement these strategies to the fullest. You can see how La République is totally hopeless when they come to a land. They cannot they cannot face us. And believe me, in a sovereign country where we'll have properly trained soldiers, I'm sure they will not be able to do anything as far as our borders are concerned. So we're very confident in our restoration forces. Absolutely, very, very confident. I can tell you that.
That is the pride of Amazonia, as you said. It truly is. So, in a press release by the United Nations Human Rights Council of October 6, 2022, this year, with a caption, "Opinions adopted by the Working Group on Arbitrary Detention at its 94th session, 29th August, 2nd September 2022, opinion number 59/2022 concerning Mrs. Julius Ayuk Tabe Wilfred, Fombag Tasang, Ngalang Fongfo, Blaise Sevidzem, Berin U Elias, Ebai Ayambe, Fidelis Ndeche, Egbe Ntri Ogork, Cornelius Njikimbe, Kwanga Henry Tata Kimeng, and Che Augustine Awasum, Cameroon and Nigeria. By this, the UN orders the immediate release and compensation of the Naira 10. This is no doubt good news, but we at Undaunted think the bigger picture by this opinion. The UN has recognized our right to self-determination, recognized the African Commission ruling in which the territory is recognized as an international entity and as a people. You heard what I just said. I mean, what do you think about this update?
Thank you for bringing up this case. It looks very flowery, but I'm shocked. I'm sorry to say that it comes short of what it should be. It is an opinion and not a resolution, and that takes away all the power of enforcement. It's just an opinion. So what? Fine, it's opinion. We knew all that, but who is going to implement it? And that's one of the weaknesses of these international bodies, where they write. If you are not very careful, if you don't if you don't have a legal assistant to interpret it for you, you can read something and literally jump, full of excitement that something has happened when in fact nothing has happened. And this is one of the cases where it's just nothing because it is an opinion. So what happens to an opinion? Nothing. If it is a resolution, now I can talk about enforcement. So, what is the enforcement? Is there anything about enforcement? They've just given an opinion. It is very, very sad that with all the effort, with all the legal might of the international community, when it comes to strategic issues or very important issues that affect people, especially those in our part of the world, it is usually an opinion and nobody really cares. And if something happens tomorrow and you complain, they'll say, oh, at least we worked on it. It is an opinion. Yeah, you worked on it, but nothing happened. Where is the resolution? How are we going to enforce it? So it is just 16 pages of very lovely words that have nothing to do with the reality on the ground. Over to you.
All right, thank you to Martin Mungwa. All right, a subtle reminder that the numbers are still on the screen and we'd like to hear your opinions. We'd like to hear what you think. We'd like to know if you have some perplexities that you would want us to, the mouthpiece of the interim government, to dissect for you tonight. In the meantime, we've been having a lot of reports, Dr. Martin Mungwa, in the past weeks. The reports of the death toll just keeps rising. It doesn't just stop, especially after every counterattack by our valiant Amazonian restoration forces. They keep, stalling and keeping La Republic du Cameroon's soldiers at bay. And most times when they get a hit, they usually come back on the civilians. Is there any way you think the Amazonian Restoration Forces or the interim government or any part of leadership of Amazonia can curb and curtail these daily killings?
Yes, we have to make sure that we recover the draft and to have enough money so that we can weaponize ourselves so that we can defend. The only reason why they go and come back because they believe that perhaps we have run out of ammunition or we run out of equipment to defend ourselves. If we can collect all the money that we require, if Amazonians of goodwill, those who have been helping the interim government, who will be supporting their government to fight these thugs out of our land, if we can collect all that money, I can assure you that you'll see the rate of deaths reduce dramatically. So there is only one message I have for that. The solution is we have to recover the money and we have to invest that and to make sure that we have the weaponry and we have all the tools we need in order to defend ourselves. It is that simple. Okay? So we have to arm ourselves one way or the other. Whatever the case, that's the only thing that we know works. And we have demonstrated over the past 5 years that when we arm ourselves, it works. It is that simple. Either we arm ourselves through our own legitimate means or we recover ammunition from the enemy to defend ourselves. All that is acceptable and that's the way we should go. Over to you.
All right, thank you so much, Dr. Martin Mungwa. I wouldn't want to have caught you there, but right now we do have a caller. Somebody has something to say or ask, and we'd like to hear that person.
Hello.
Hello.
Okay, we can hear you.
Yes, I'm Troy Salot, SOS, and the undaunted team we did for it. Now you and I want to talk for confront and all the restoration forces directly. I want to tell confront, say, make some person not confuse one. This war, na semi-la republic, a part go for the country. We know we start this war, na semi they free some prisoners. Now say me they do whatsoever. We will not be distracted from outside it. When people they say me they free this prisoner, they free this. Because all those prisoners they free them with conditions, and tomorrow they will still carry them again, go put up for prison. With problem, now say me la republic they go back for its own country. They will not be distracted when they talk saying, oh, they want free prisoners, they want free this one, so. No. The most important thing is our land, our freedom. Let the Republic go to her own boundaries. And she achieved it on the 1st of January 1960. So that is exactly what doing a bill. Let we know. This is a Republic, a big consisted of subdivision and division. We get LGAs and counties. All the restoration forces will fall between counties and LGAs. Make one stop for you use this thing what they call as unity. Unity is that now for it all those kind of stuff when they get from body. All the restoration forces make the give an ultimatum for all the activists or whosoever, any individual. Say me go to raise money on top them or maybe they call their names them. When I get for all when I counties and LGAs them, even I need money, they raise money for now. Because when an individual in Canada don't need to raise money for a general, for a fighter, they will talk to me, you tell people who send the money for this. They send the money for this, then they narrow up or come to cash you. So me will tell for all these activities when they want to call their names for general, they want this general come together, big general do so. Tell them say they are abroad. They are problem for this money for their counties. They go to diplomacy, let them allow the generals alone. And the general they be united all their LGA and their countries at time on plenty.
Thank you, Ochiba. Thanks for that piece of advice.
Okay. Okay, and that was more like a contribution, but I'm sure the caller has already ended. I was going to ask something, but that's cool. That's a really amazing contribution. So, Dr. Martin, is there something else you'd like to tell the audience to do? Because I asked the last question in regards to what the interim government can do to curtail this debt, but then there's, on the other hand, the masses, the citizens of the people in Amazonia. What do you think? Is there something that they can do to save themselves from these incessant and unwanted killings?
Yeah, well, I did talk
I know
about that, and I
usually it's more
remember
like
the vice president.
it's not even like they need any guilty person to either arrest or kill, because the last time it was someone wearing blue and white. How would you know that could get you arrested? So there is, for my end, I really can think of something, but I don't know if you can think of something the audience could
Yeah,
do to save themselves from these incessant killings.
yeah. Thank you. I think again you're right. I think I answered it. It was not in full. I think the other end of it, as I mentioned, is that we all have to be armed. I can assure you that when these thugs they come to a hospital to arrest people, if somebody gets out there and with a gun and gets rid of them, I'm sure they'll start to think twice to come to places to attack us. The vice president actually mentioned this a couple of months or weeks ago, that it's come to a point where we all really have to be armed. It is, I mean, when La Republique talk arrives, you are at the mercy of you and you know the mercy of God. But if they know that somewhere people have arms hidden, weapons, so when they show up, you get out of your house and and you get rid of them, I think they'll think twice. This somebody who's trying to ask a question now. Okay. Hello, Ruth.
Hello.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you as well as thank you the Undaunted crew for the eloquent explanation that you have just put through as far as Amazonian is concerned. But I have this concern, sir. You talked about the the cooperation agreement. And to the best of our knowledge, we understand that Amazonia was not part of that Pacte de Cooperation. How come is it that our money from our own region is, you said 52%, or is how many percentage that is given to French government? But how come they came to that agreement? And also because we don't have a union treaty, what is actually the union that makes that possible? And how can we explain that in a more detailed way to Amazonians? Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Ruth. I think that's actually the reason why we're at war, because we never had any monetary policy with La République or with France. And that's why we are having this war. We're having this war because we are an independent people. For the past 9 months, I started my discussion, and I brought to the Amazonian people this secret accord that La République signed at independence in exchange for their independence prior to us even contemplating to join them. They signed an accord on December 26, 1959. And in that accord, they accepted to surrender their economy, their society, their education, everything about them to the French, that the French were going to control them. Today, you have French citizens living in La République du Cameroon who, behind the scene, they write legislation to send to parliament. People think that is sent from France. No, they are French citizens living in Yaoundé. Whenever they have to write any legislation, these Frenchmen, they write it and they translate it themselves and they send it to parliament and it's signed. That's part of the accord. So let Amazonians understand this. These people are all resident in Yaoundé and they do all these things. And they manipulate the government and they make sure that they take the resources from our part of the world where we never had any treaty whatsoever. I mean, coming to what the caller, Ruth, my chief of staff, thanks for bringing that up. We have to keep educating Amazonians. And when we say that the French are taking our resources for free, it is serious. When you realize that we don't have a well-functional hospital, we don't have roads that work, our education standards are going down, and yet our money is like, carrying water in a basket, is all going to France, and there are enablers who think that this is a good thing for us to have a federation. How are you going to seal that drain hole, that drain that our money is going through? That is why we are looking for complete, unconditional independence and sovereignty. Tell the spoilers, tell the enablers how they can explain us going for a federation with this loophole, this treaty that La République signed with Paris on December 26, 1959, to surrender everything about themselves to the French. You tell me, how can you control your economy when you cannot control your banks? That's why BEAC is in Yaoundé. BEAC is in Yaoundé to make sure that all that money is collected and sent to France. And that's why you can never have an Ambazonian as head of that bank. You will be lucky as an Ambazonian to even work in that bank. That is the fact. You'll find out for yourselves. That's why we are fighting this war. We are fighting this war for real reasons. We are fighting this war for practical reasons. You cannot sacrifice 50% of your foreign exports to a foreign country and tell me that you are independent. And yet these people are all fighting to be prime minister. They're fighting to be minister of territorial administration. They're fighting to be minister of higher education. And yet behind the scene, they collect everything and they send to Paris. And we have to accept that? No. The interim government says no. These are the facts. France is taking
Actually.
50% of all our foreign exports. And you can't even speak English in Amazonia because of France.
Said fact.
The thing we have to learn to speak French. That's an insult to injury. I hope I've answered that. Thank you. Over to you.
You're right, indeed. Amazonians need absolute independence. Absolute independence. All right. Thank you so much, the audience, for putting in your calls and everybody else. But an information getting to me is you are trying to call Dr. Martin Mungwa directly. Please do not do that. Follow strictly the number on screen. Thank you so much. And Dr. Martin Mungwa, in regards to the last question I asked before the caller came in, it is an opinion, truly, no doubt. But what do you think about the fact, by the opinion of the UN, that it has recognized our right to self-determination, recognized African Commission ruling in which the territory is recognized as an international entity as a people? What do you think about that fact?
Well, absolutely, that's wonderful. But at least if they can uh, put that into action to actually support us to have this independence, then we know it is genuine. It is on paper. We took it upon ourselves when we recognized that we have the right to self-determination. But the UN has been dragging its feet for 5 years today. Do they want everybody to be killed and then they show up as they did in Rwanda to say, never again, we shall never accept this again? I mean, it's almost like a double standard. Meanwhile, in Ukraine, within a month of Russia declaring war on it, you have more than 40 countries supporting Ukraine. But yet, up to today, no one, except thanks to the US Senate and the US Congress, that has written, I think, they've made about 4 resolutions on Amazonia. And look at France. This is so-called an advanced Western country. Knowing exactly what is happening in Amazonia, have you ever heard of any resolution out of the French Parliament? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. So we hope that, this double standard will stop, and they should not only write on paper. It appears that if it is a country of a Western nation, of course, they will apply it and make sure that it holds. But if it is not a Western country, everybody turns their head and only wait until everything is bad, and then they'll come, shedding crocodile tears. I think it will be useful if they actually stand up and declare that what is happening to our people is not correct, and to help us get to our sovereignty, the sooner the better. Thank you.
It's always nice to have you here clarify every questions of the general public. And most importantly, we have a caller right now. So I think before I say anything else, I'd like that caller's call to be taken in right now.
Hello? Hello, am I audible? Hello, Dr. Mungwa. Sorry, Dr. Mungwa, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, can you guys in the studio give feedback to Star Smart so that she can follow up with this caller? Yes, go ahead, Mayor Carey.
I can hear him, but I'm not sure. Dr. Martin, can you hear him?
Yes, go ahead, please.
Okay, please go ahead, caller.
Hello. Thank you very much for a great show today. Thank you, Star Smart. Thank you, SOS Dr. Martin Mungwa. My name is Mayor Kari. I just called to make a contribution to today's discussion. In addition to the illegality that is characterized by the Accord de Coopération that you just mentioned here today, I just want to also ask if it is possible for you to touch on the point that, only two independent nations can federate. Okay? And so, based on Resolution 1605, La République du Cameroon and the then Southern Cameroons were supposed to sit down and negotiate the terms of the union to sign, a union treaty before a federation. Because by international law, only independent nations or sovereign nations can federate. And so the mafia that took place in 1961 is being perpetuated in Canada today by some people going up there and talking about they're going to talk about the federation and all of that, And so I thought maybe it would be a good idea for SOS Dr. Mungwa, if he doesn't mind, to educate our viewers and our listeners about the importance of this. And so that it adds on to the illegality that is associated with the Accord de Coopération. And so no matter how much you can twist an illegality, it remains an illegality. And so that is the little contribution that I call in today to make. Thank you once again for giving me a chance to be part of it today. A year.
Thank you, Mayor Carey. I think this Accord de Coopération, I would like to promise you that there will be future. I mean, there is no presentation without mentioning that Accord de Coopération, because that has been the major stumbling block between La République and Amazonia. That's made it absolutely impossible for us to have any type of relationship whatsoever, because you cannot be in a room talking to La République and behind La République there's a shadow of France. It is impossible. How can you negotiate with people? Ahidjo assured Frontier that he was going to respect the federation, and the French were simply laughing behind. They say, "Oh my goodness, this guy is crazy." And soon after that, of course, they were the first who breached that pact. So I don't know how much I have to say to inform the Amazonian people that so long as that pact is in place, there is no way that we can ever have anything to do with that Republic of Cameroon. And the only position that we hold is we must have our independence. If there is any area of cooperation that we want to have with La République of Cameroon, it has to be on the basis of state between two states. We cannot accept this inferior position that they have placed us, whereby we are only there to execute policies that have been drawn up by France, which ultimately is actually to destroy both La République and Amazonia. If La République decides to go into the latrine with the French, or to get drowned in the river with the French, it's up to them. They can do that. But we are saying we don't want it. It is that simple. We want to be in control of our destiny. And that's why any talk about being in a union or being in a federation is totally off the table. We can never negotiate that. We have to go for sovereignty. And those proponents of federalism, let them come out and tell us how the federal system is going to be in our favor. And particularly, how are they going to resolve the situation where we are losing 50% of our exports to France? Remember that the Americans went to war with England, with Britain, because they were taxing them. It was just 7%. Okay? And that's why they say the Tea Party, that's how it came about in Boston. 7% tax. They had to go to war. But today, we are sacrificing 50% of our exports to France, and everybody is sitting and thinking that we should accept it. We cannot accept. That's why we'll be perpetually poor for the rest of humanity. We cannot accept. And that's the position of the interim government. Thank you. Over to you.
All right, thank you so much, Dr. Martin Mungwa. I think we've had our last caller for today, except there are any more calls, which I am not so sure in the minute right now. Well, it was a very educative, as always, session tonight in the movement with you, Dr. Martin Mungwa. For me, on this end, you've clarified at the moment all of my questions, and I believe that of the Amazonians, the audience who called today, they have also been clarified. With that, would like you to say your last words for tonight to the audience.
Thank you very much, and I'd like to thank Ambazonians for taking time to listen to the interim government. I represent the mouthpiece of the government, so I do the best to make sure that I educate you. I would like that at the end of my presentation, you should have some takeaways. And the takeaway for today is we have to make sure that the ARFs, they listen to the interim government, because you have a bunch of coup plotters, distractors, spoilers, people who want to collaborate with La République du Cameroon. They are all working very hard to make sure that they can disassociate or break the ARFs away from the interim government. It is the objective is very simple. When they do that, they are going to surround everybody in at the home front, either put them in jail or kill all of them, and that will be the end of this revolution. We cannot allow that happen. We cannot allow that happen. So I'm informing our ARFs, I'm informing the Amazonian people that the that the interim government, that is the hope of the Amazonian people. And we are working extremely hard to make sure that this sovereignty becomes a reality. And I would also want to make Amazonians understand federalism, being in a what I call a unionism or unionist or whatever you may call it, it is off the table. Whoever is fighting to be a union of La République du Cameroon, or to be in a federal or confederal, whatever they call it, it is off the table. We cannot continue to surrender 50% of our foreign export to France. That is not acceptable. We cannot grow an economy where we lose 50% of our exports. It's like you take your salary and you give 50% to somebody else. How are you going to raise a family? That is not acceptable. And these are the reasons why we believe that we need sovereignty. And for all those coup plotters, all those enablers, all those spoilers who are going around dancing and singing and having secret meetings with La République du Cameroon, we want to inform you that there will be a time when they'll be called to explain their actions to Amazonian people. Thank you and good night.